Jesus says in his final words to the Father there in that time of prayer, he says, Father, glorify thy name. Above everything else, my own personal desires, my own emotional needs, Father, you glorify your name. And then the Father, God himself, answers his Son, and he says, Son, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. Now the next verse is a bit strange. It says, and those standing around when the Father spoke to his Son, it said they heard thunder. Or in other words, they didn't understand, even though they heard the sound of the voice. To them it was just thunder. They couldn't understand the Father's words that, Son, I've glorified you and I'm going to glorify you again. They couldn't understand the cross. And so to them, everything taking place was thunder. It was just noise. And for a lot of people today, including believers, we listen to the news, we hear what's going on, and to us it's thunder. And yet he just told us here, there's a secret way of understanding that thunder. Come in a little deeper and hear the heart of God. You know, if you'd lived in Egypt at the time prior to God delivering them, when the judgments were falling, plagues, frogs, lice, water turning to blood, you said, well, weren't God's people protected in Goshen? Yes, but think about it. Let's keep it real. If that were happening today and you consider yourself in a Goshen land spiritually protected by God, in spite of all the COVID-19 and all the economic worries and all the potentials of persecution that may be coming for believers, and you're surrounded by that. They were surrounded by God's judgments, even though they weren't the victims of it. You know that there were many a night when Benjamin would come home and look over at Sarah and say, Sarah, have you heard? There's frogs everywhere. What? Frogs? What's going on? Yeah, now there's lice everywhere, and the water's turned to blood. To the average ear and the unseeing eye, it looked like the world was ending. What has happened? What is going on? What will happen next? And yet it was in the midst of those judgments, thunder, that God was preparing to bring a great outpouring of rain that would bring his people out of burdened bondage in Egypt into the promises of his land. And that's what I'm challenging you with today. Examine your heart. Paul said we need to renew our minds. See things the way God sees them. You know, there's no more bloodshed in the Bible than in the book of Revelation. It's filled with blood and martyrs from one end to the other. And yet it's in that very book that we find intermingled with the blood of those that are going through great tribulation, great thunderous days. And yet it says they're rejoicing. Read Revelation chapter 18 and 19. They even says they're rejoicing over God's judgments. They're rejoicing that God's righteousness is going to reign supreme, and that the enemies of God are going to be proven for what they are, enemies of God and righteousness and everything that's good and true. And for those who are spiritually mature, when we see and hear the thunder around us of what's happening and what is proposed to happen and what the devil may be up to, listen, my friends. It's just thunder to the world. But to a believer, it should be the trumpet sound that rain is right behind it. Can you see beyond the thunder, through the thunder and lightning, and see the rain coming? And place your faith in that. Yes. That's the key.